whole deal is we're leaning into God, believing that no matter what happens in our lives, no matter what we go through, no matter what distractions or things come against us today, what I really want us to talk about is what if we didn't allow any of those things to impact the decisions or the choices that we made in life? And what if we truly lean into, as Jacob talked last week about trusting God and leaning in and believing in who he is and what he says, and just letting that faith and that trust that we have allow us to do and to drive us to do the things that he's asked us to do, to truly take that and to do it. So I just simply, as I was preparing, I just was trying to find some catchy or cool title or whatever, and what I just really landed in is like, what if I did what God said? What if I just did what he said? How would that impact my life? What if I chose not to let my circumstances or my situations dictate the actions that I did, to determine the choices that I made? And what if I just did what he said to do? How different would my life live? Sometimes that comes from moments and times when I don't see the outcome, or I'm faced with circumstances and situations, and I'm struggling to figure out how to make my life work, or how to make things come together, or provisions, or whatever I need in life. And so those distract me from just simply trusting God and doing what he says, whether in his word, what he's speaking to my heart, the assignments that he has for me in life, and just leaning into that. So today we're going to be in the book of 1 Kings chapter 17, and we're going to look at a situation that Elijah found himself in. And we're going to look at his step of faith in trusting God, but also the lives of the family that God calls him to, in the step of trust that they had. And then we're going to look at what the Bible talks to us about living in this trust and these steps of faith when God moved and spoke and people followed through with what he said to do. So chapter 17, verse 7 said, "Sometime later the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land." So God had sent a drought because of Israel falling away. Elijah prophesied, said no rain, there's going to be a drought. But God had kept him, provided for him by positioning him to live by this brook so that he would have water. And ravens came to him every day and provided him with food. Pretty cool setup, right? It's pretty neat. But he's living there, and his season has ended, right? Sometime later that brook dried up because of there being no rain. Then the word of the Lord came to him. "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and live there. Stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord send rain on the land. She went away and did as Elijah told her to do. She went away and did what Elijah told her to do. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word the Lord spoke by Elijah. She went away and did what the man of God told her to do. But man, there's so much in this. So much as you look through it. So much as you look through this. And really what jumped out, even to me and Meg, as we were talking through this and discussing what it would look like to do what God told us to do, it starts off by saying that, so the brook is dried up, right? This was Elijah's provision and substance, was the brook. And ravens came every day and brought him meat. I mean, crazy supply, crazy just move of God in his life to bring provision, and it's gone. Now, the reason it's gone was the very same reason as Elijah spoke, saying there's going to be a drought. Now, God brings provision, but the very thing that God told him to do is what now takes away the provision. But there was a purpose to the season change, and when he did what God had told him to do, he went to the place God had him to be, God provided. Now it's ended, it's ran dry, the brooks ran dry. And there's many times in my life, and I'm sure in yours, you probably stand at a season where you say, God, I did what you asked me to do. But now it's gone. And we begin to question God instead of asking God the question, what's the purpose? And maybe the purpose is God is speaking to you because the season is changing. Whether it's in a job or it's in those things. Now, remind you, just because things get hard does not mean that God's calling you to leave. We're not running away from things that God's called us to just because seasons get difficult. We're also not stepping out against things that go against his word. So just because things get hard, if the life that you're living, if decisions, if the things you want to run from or run to are not in line with his word, then that's not where he's trying to get you to go. Okay, so that's important. What we're trying to discern is when there's a shift in our season, is God trying to speak something new to me? And in this case, he is speaking something new to Elijah, and he says, all right, the brook is dried up. Now I want you to go to the town of Zarephath. And then he tells him, I have directed a widow to supply you with food. And that jumped out at us as I was reading through this, that our first takeaway, that not only is God with you in your present, but he also goes before you. So he's calling him to go somewhere new, to make this new step in his ministry and the call that God's placed on his life. He's got somewhere new he wants him to go, something new he wants him to do. He's calling him to do something. And not only was he with him in his present, but he's already gone before him, because he said, I've directed a widow to supply you with food. And it's so cool thinking about this, because even before I read this, we have a 9-year-old boy, Jonah, who me and him got in this talk about trusting God and living for God and God being able to go. And it was cool being able to go before us and being there. And it was so neat to be able to talk with him about the aspect that God being omnipresent doesn't just mean that he's everywhere at all times, but that he is also everywhere in time. So he goes before you because he's not limited to time itself. He lives outside of time, meaning that he is everywhere, but he's also everywhere in space and in time. So he's been in your present, and he is providing and writing a beautiful plan for your life. And if you will choose to do what he says, then the things that he has planned, that he has directed, that he has ordained are waiting for you in your present, in your future. Now, we don't always experience those because we don't always do what he told us to do. Right? I haven't always done what he told me to do. And there's some things that I'm sure God wrote a beautiful story for that I missed because I chose to do my thing. I chose to go my place. But that doesn't cancel out that even when I don't choose those, God is continuing to write a beautiful plan in my future. And Jonah, man, it almost brought tears to my eyes that he said, he was like, and if he's continuing to write a beautiful story for my life, even when I don't choose it. Man, how much more does that speak to how much he loves me? That he doesn't quit writing a beautiful story for my life just because I'm not choosing to live in it. And then he said, if he's able to do that, then he's able, and he allows me to step right back into it if I choose to. And that's what I want you to hear today, that he's gone before you, right? And if you haven't been doing what he said, if you haven't lived into the beautiful story that he's writing for your life, that there is always a way back into it. It's one decision, to begin to do what he's calling you to do, to begin to live out the life he's calling you to what if I did what he said? What if I did it? So he's gone before you. And today maybe you felt him speaking to you about doing new things or going new places. And you're like, but I don't know how, when I get there, this is going to be. And so can I just encourage you today that he's already there. And he's already working it out. Trust him. Do what he's asking you to do. And know that his provision has gone before you. That he is there. Because a common reaction is what we see. Once Elijah does get there, he goes to the town gate. The widow woman is there gathering some sticks. And what we see is that Elijah recognizes that this is potentially the person God has ordained for me to stay with, to be with, that God has directed. And he asks, will you bring me a jar of water that I could have a drink? And she is obliging to this, but then when he says, can you just please, one more thing, will you make me just a little cake, a little piece of bread that I may eat? Man, and I don't know what her mood was or her tone was before this. I'm sure as we read the story, she was preparing to make her the last meal that she thought for herself and her son, and then she said, we're going to go home and die. Right, so I doubt she was in a great mood to begin with. And when you're already faced with frustration, and as we read before, it said God had directed her. Some versions say God had commanded her. But the language that we see there is God had already been dealing with this woman's heart about providing for other people, even when she was in the middle of lack. So sometimes what God's speaking to you has nothing to do with going somewhere new, but being open to do something new where you're at. Right? And so God has been dealing with her heart about providing and helping people. And maybe he's been saying, there's a prophet's going to come to town and I want you to give him food. But as we see, this isn't even her God, because the town of Zarephath wasn't Jewish. He had gone outside of their area and was now with the Gentiles. So that's why we see him say, can I have some water? And I'm sure it was like, okay, fine. Sure, I'll get you some water. And so she goes to get the water. And as she's turning, please, will you just make me a little piece of bread? And at this, she turns around and is like, by your God. I mean, that's how we know she didn't believe in God, right? She says, by your God. She's basically like, oh, are you serious? By your God, I don't have anything. In fact, the little bit that I did have, I was gathering just a few sticks to go home, make some bread with a little bit of oil and a little bit of flour that I have to make a last meal for me and my son, and then we're going to die. I mean, she was through with Elijah at this. But there's so many times in my life that I feel God speak to my heart, and my reaction is to focus on my lack. And when I hear God speak, is to then in turn to him and say, but you know I don't have anything. Are you seriously asking this of me? Because I don't have it to give. I don't have it to do. I don't have the ability. And it's easy for that to be my response. But God's calling us to step out and trust him, right? To live in a manner where we're allowing him to move in and through our lives. So if the point is him, if the point is Jesus, and if he's asked us to do it, and he's already gone before us to make provisions for us, then Our next takeaway, my situation is not determined by my lack, but by his endless provision. Right? Because he is the one that is limitless in this. Right? The scripture that says, to him who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that I could ever think, ask, or imagine. Right? So he's not limited by my limitations. In fact, Paul says that in my weakness, then I'm strong. Because it's Christ in me. Because now it has nothing to do with my ability or what I have. Because in line with his will and in his ways, I have all that I need. Because I have him working in and through my life. Then I can stand in this trust, in this faith, to believe that he is with me. And that he will get me through. And that he has all that I need. And so Elijah tells her, don't be afraid. Man, and I know for me, I feel that quite often. That when God calls us to new or speaks to our hearts or situations come my way and I feel like I don't have enough to make it anymore. And God begins to speak to me. All right, I understand. Don't be afraid. And then Elijah asks her, he says, I understand what you're doing. Go ahead, gather your sticks, go home, prepare to make the meal. But just make a small one for me first. Take a baby step. Just a small one for me, just a small piece. Bring it to me first. And then make one for you and your son. Make one for you and your son. Because if you do what he's asked of you, when we live into obedience to his word, right, he said, just do this. Then here's the word of the Lord. Your jar of flour and your jug of oil will not run dry. It will not run out until rain comes back, until there is a more bountiful provision available to you. What you have will not go away. And she agrees. Because our next takeaway, obedience to the word and will of God, positions me to see the faithfulness of God. Obedience to the word and will of God positions me to see the faithfulness of God. That when I step into obedience to his word, man, Jesus is teaching one day and he is explaining, and I know it's a verse that a lot of us know and quote, that you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. Right? And that's amazing. I mean, we know that truth, he is the way, the truth, and the life. So he's talking about knowing him personally and living this out. But right before that, he is teaching his disciples that he said that if you will obey my commandments and do what I've asked you to do, then you will know the truth. So if we understand that, then he's not saying, if you gain information about me, then you will know truth. No, he said, if you hear my words, if you listen to what I say, and then you go and do it, then you will know the truth. Because you've experienced it. You've lived in it. You've stepped into obedience. And when we live into obedience and we do what he's asked, then we know the truth. And that truth will set us free. Set us free from worry and doubt. Set us free from anxiety and fear, and allow us to live into that joy, because then I know the truth because I've experienced him for myself. And now I'm not living off of what other people say or what I have perceived or conceived for myself, but I'm living into who he is. And I'm listening to what he says, and I'm following through in obedience, and I'm living that out. man, and it sets me free. It positions me to experience the fullness of his faithfulness because I am living into the plan that he has created. And in obedience, I experience it in a whole new way. Oh, so what if I just did what he said to do? What if I lived into obedience? How much more of his faithfulness would I get to see and experience because I've opened up to myself for it? I have positioned myself to receive it. But the other thing that really jumped out to me, and is very true. Our next takeaway would be that obedience is a choice we must continuously make. So that this isn't just a one-time, okay, fine, I'll do this. And I don't know if just as a kid I missed this or I didn't see it. But it says that after she did that, after she went away, all that was spoken in verse 15, it says she went away and did as Elijah told her to do. So she did what the man of God told her to do, the representation, the word of God, the word from the Lord to her. So she did what the Lord asked her to do. And it says, so there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. So for her and her son. And in my mind, I saw this as she, in this one step of obedience to provide Elijah with a cake, her and her son had the groceries, the ingredients they needed every day for a cake. And I saw this as this one-time step of obedience that led to ingredients every day until rain came. But that said that when she did what the Lord said, that there was food every day for Elijah, for herself and her son. So that means that every day she got up, she made a cake for Elijah with what was not enough for her and her son. She brought it to the man of God. She went back, and there was enough in the jar still. It didn't run dry. It didn't go empty. And she made one for herself and her son. And then the next time she went, there was enough to make one for Elijah. So she brought it to him. Then she came back. It didn't go out. It's still there. So I make one for myself and my son. And the next time she goes back, I make one for the man of God. And then I come back, and there's still flour and oil to make one for myself and my son. And it was an everyday choice to be obedient and to live into his word. It was an everyday thing. It was continually deciding to be obedient. Paul says that I get up every day and I crucify my flesh, or I say no to me. He's writing in this way of saying that every day I get up and I choose to say no to me and to say yes to the word and will of God. I do this every day. And it's living into this understanding that it is an everyday thing. But if we live into that, then that means I wake up today and say, today I choose to be obedient. And I focus on my obedience for today, trusting God with tomorrow. I'm not there. And so Jesus even said, why worry about tomorrow? Tomorrow has enough worries for itself. The birds don't worry about what they're going to eat tomorrow. The flowers don't worry about what they're going to wear, but they're taken care of. The birds have food every day. The flowers are more beautiful than any of Solomon's clothes. So focus on today. Be obedient today. Because you can do anything for a day, right? Today, I can choose to be obedient to the word and will of God. And when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and say, today, God, I choose to be obedient. And as I walk in this daily steps of obedience, then I feel God's direction and voice in my decisions. And when I'm faced with obstacles and circumstances, I sit there and say, God, I trust you with it. And I'm going to continue to live out what you've said, what you will, and what you want from me. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll do what you want me to do. I'll stay where you want me to stay. I'll speak to who you want me to speak to. I will live into what you're saying. God, what you're directing me to in my life, and God, and what you say in your word, I'll do it. I'm going to live it out, and I choose to do that today. And I make it an everyday thing. Every day. I mean, those steps, every day, she had to go and gather more sticks. She had to go and prepare a fire to make a meal. She had to trust that it wasn't going to run out. And she had to choose obedience. Man, and there's more stories like that. Elisha followed Elijah as the next prophet of God. And Elisha was called and came to a widow woman as well one time who had multiple sons. And the debt collector was coming to seize anything they had and was even going to take her sons as collateral because she was unable to pay back what she owed. And so she came to Elisha and was like, I don't know what to do. And Elisha says, what do you have? I have a little bit of oil. He goes, okay. Go and get as many jars, jugs, clay vessels. Go and get as many vessels as you can. And don't stop at just a few. Go and get as many as you can. Because as many vessels as you have, that's how much oil you will have. So as long as you have more empty vessels, you will be able to pour more oil into those vessels. And once you've filled all of them up, go and sell all of them that you have to get the money you need to pay back the debt collector. This endless supply. To not just stop at simple steps of obedience, thinking that if I say yes today, but every day and for every moment, and to go beyond what I feel like is the obligation of obedience and to step into the fullness of sacrificial living and giving my life to him and going all the way into that because he has more. He has more. So if I was Elijah talking to the widow woman, knowing there's going to be flour every day, I'd be like, don't just gather sticks for a famine. Gather sticks for a feast because your flour is not going to go out. And your oil is not going to go dry. You're not going to run out of it. And Elisha, speaking to his situation, don't just get a few. Go everywhere and to everyone. Find any empty vessel you can. Go to your neighbors. Go everywhere. Don't just stop at a little bit, but go all out. Step in to see what God does. Because in that, we open ourselves up to experience the fullness of what he has for our lives. And then when we're faced with these situations and these circumstances, when we find ourselves maybe like Moses at the Red Sea, and we're called and God, the word of the Lord comes to him and says, stretch out your arm. Well, this doesn't make sense. To step and to follow this step of obedience right now, there's an army coming at me from behind to take us back to Egypt or to kill us. And there's a Red Sea in front of me. I don't know what to do. Stretch your arm out. How is that going to help anything? Stretch your arm out. And in a step of obedience, God begins to part the waters. The winds come in, and all night the waters are parted. And Moses, with his arms stretched out, I'm sure as the wind blew, I would have been like, oh, something's happening. Okay, cool. The water's moving. Okay, I'll just continue to do what you've told me to do. And the amazement as something's moving. The water's how is it getting lower? It's starting to build up in mounds. All right, I'm just going to stay right here and see what happens. And as he began to continue to stand there and to continue to do what God had instructed him to do, the waters parted and there was dry ground. God moved all moisture to the left and to the right until they walked across on dry ground to experience the freedom and the faithfulness of God. We see time and time again where people stepped out in obedience to trust, to follow him, and to what he had for them, to do what God had asked and called on them to do. Man, in the faithfulness of God that came through, whether it was Joshua facing the wall of Jericho, walking around it 7 times, once a day for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, what you're going to do is walk around it again, but 7 times today. And then that big old wall you see is just going to fall. And then you're going to beat them in battle. Simple steps of obedience sometimes that seem unconventional. I'm going to stretch my arm out over some water to see the sea part and to get free. I'm going to walk around a wall, trusting you to see me win a battle and a victory in my life. I'm going to give you what's yours first, and then realize that I still have what I need. I'm going to go and get more vessels, trusting that there's going to continue to be more oil. When I'm filling up vessels with what's not, I don't even have enough in this one to fill these up, but it just keeps coming. It just keeps coming. And Elijah told her that if you will do this, and more problems came, it's not that life didn't continue to happen. At one moment, her son dies. You know what she does? She goes back to God. She has recognized the faithful provision of the Lord. And so when her son dies, she goes to Elijah and goes, now what? What do I do? And the man of God takes the son, goes up to the chamber where he had been living, and goes to God and says, now what? And he stretches himself out over the boy. And the boy comes back to life. And he brings him back down to the mother. And it says at that moment, it wasn't Elijah's God anymore. It wasn't by your God anymore. She said, your God is God. And it became her God. And now her steps of obedience came from a place of relationship between her and the God she now knows to be real and faithful. And every day, until Elijah left and until the brook dried up, she would make a cake for Elijah and then some for her and her son. And I'm sure at this point now, she's walking out going, all right. She's just grabbing the ingredients now. She's not even trying to measure them out. She's not sure what's there. She just knows God's going to provide. So I'm going to take the ingredients. I'm going to make you some bread. I'm going to gather some sticks. And now I know when I go back, I'm not even worried about it anymore. I'm not even thinking about it, because I know that when I go back, your provision's still going to be there. That when I do what you've asked me to do, when I step into what you will, I will see your faithfulness every time. And now it's becoming an automatic steps of obedience. And she had to choose each day. I'm going to be obedient because I know before you were faithful. So I know now you're going to be faithful. And I'm going to continue to do what you've asked. I'm going to continue to live in this, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's hard, even when I can't see or understand how I'm going to meet or be provided for or see a victory. Even when I'm standing there, I'm going to be obedient and trust you to be miraculous. I'm going to be obedient and trust you to do the impossible. That's what Joshua told the children of Israel. He said before they crossed the Jordan River to go into the promised land, he said, choose you today who you're going to serve. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. I'm making a decision today. So tomorrow, when the ark of the Lord goes, I want you to follow it. But tonight, I want you to consecrate yourself. Give yourself completely to God. Consecrate yourself to the Lord, because tomorrow he will do amazing things. So our role in this is to be obedient and to follow. His job, his responsibility is to do the impossible, is to bring about the provision. So we're obedient. We live this out every day. We walk this out with him. We be responsible to his word and to his will, and we follow him in steps of obedience. And as we do, we see his faithfulness, and it grows and it compounds today. Man, because our last takeaway, God has proven his faithfulness. So, get more sticks, gather more jars, choose obedience to the fullest extent. Can I tell you, in his word, if you go to his word, you will see where God has proven his faithfulness time and time again. In the lives of people in this church and around you, God has proven his faithfulness time and time again. Maybe in your life, you've experienced the faithfulness and provision of God before, but you've just stopped walking in obedience and you've stopped following him. But can I tell you today, that wherever you're at in life and whatever example you need to look to today, God has proven his faithfulness. So I implore you today, go get more sticks. Go give God what's his. Go gather more jars to see the endless and the fullness of his faithfulness in your life. Don't just stop and say, today I'm going to be obedient and then we'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe today. And don't get stuck in, well, I did it once. I did it once. I did what you asked me to do before. So why? God's like, continue to walk in obedience. Continue to live this life out for me. Continue in this to experience the fullness. And just like the widow that chose every day, that then saw God bring about resurrection in her own son's life, it became a real and tangible and personal relationship with that God, so that every day, man, I'm going to go make more. I'm going to go give God his. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to go give to God what's his, and then I'm going to have enough for me. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to gather more sticks. I imagine the next few times before, her attitude was, I'm just going to gather a few sticks. And then by this time, she's sitting there with bundles of sticks, being like, I'm going to get as many sticks as I can because I'm going to be able to provide for my son because of God. And then when God sent rain, the fruitfulness to the land itself, she was able to get more than she needed. Be able to see the jar not just have enough, but she was able to go get what she needed to see the jar filled. She was able to walk in full obedience until the day where God would deliver the rain into her life so that she could have her jar be full. And in your life today, if you will walk in steps of obedience, choose him, then you will see that if you will live your life for God first, then he will provide for you, and there will always be enough. There will always be enough until the day that God sends the rain into your life and you see it full. And you see it full. But the point is that God's faithfulness will be fulfilled every day. That he will never leave you. He'll go before you. He'll be with you. Choose obedience every day. And when you choose obedience, sometimes it looks like building a fire, believing he'll provide flour. Building a boat, even when you've never seen rain. Going to places that God will show you. Raising a staff to part a sea, walking around a wall to knock it down, passing out a boy's sack lunch to feed 5,000 people. Sometimes it's getting out of a boat to walk on water. Sometimes it's saying yes to whatever he wills, no matter how much you feel you lack. Because he has all that you need. He is all that you need. Today, he's speaking to our hearts to just simply ask you, will you choose obedience today? Maybe it's to a life to him, where it's not just their God anymore, but he becomes your God. And you live into the obedience of understanding that you, God, I'm stepping into obedience to your word, and I'm accepting a relationship with you today, God, where I can live this out with you, and I choose to live my life for you, and you are now my God. Maybe today you're faced with just the uncertainties of life, and they're distracting you from doing what you know to do. The uncertainties of life and the pain that comes is causing you to look at what could bring a false sense of satisfaction, what could bring about what seems to be an easy way out of your situation. But God's speaking to your heart to say, just live into obedience to a life with me. Live into obedience to a life with me, and you will have all that you need. Maybe today it's to a specific call. God is asking you to do something, and you feel like you don't have enough. You feel like, I don't have the means to accomplish, Lord, what you're asking me to do. Whether I don't have the personality for that, I don't have the financial means for this, God, I can't do this that you're asking me to do. And maybe it's as simple as going and speaking to someone, or being willing to provide for someone in need. Or maybe it's a specific call and request on your life to go to a new job, to start a new business, to step off into a ministry avenue, to join a team. But God's asking you to do something you feel like you don't have the means to do. And God's like, if you will just follow me, if you'll just say yes, then you'll see my provision in your life. You'll see that it was never about you, but I'll give you the strength that you need to do and accomplish, because it's me. It's me. It's the Holy Spirit through your life that gives you what you need to accomplish what He's asked you to do. Because the God who called you is able to do what He called you to do. So He's got you today if you will trust and obey. Then if you're standing at a Red Sea today, you're going to see Him come through if you'll just stretch your arm out. Just stretch your arms out to Him. Stretch your hands out to Him. Step into obedience today and see Him move in your life.